Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Gluu webinar. My name is Louise, and I work for Gluu. Gluu is a business process management platform that makes processes easier to understand, execute, and improve. Today, we'll focus on how we bring our suppliers into our processes. And how we explore all our connections. This webinar will have two parts. Firstly, we'll discuss the benefits of involving business users in mapping and maintaining the relationship between processes, systems, and other assets. And secondly, we'll show you a number of specific use cases using Gluu's new Explorer tool. I have my colleague Søren with me today to help us explore this topic. Søren, why should business users be involved in this?
Yeah, that's a good question, and some may say that they should not be involved. But of course, as Gluu, we have the philosophy that it all starts with the business user, the person doing the work. We are inspired by the lean philosophy, not the lean tools, but the philosophy. And it always takes the starting point in the person doing the work, because they are closest to the problem and they are the ones we need to support with tooling. So if you take that starting point, then obviously you can't have in a medium-sized or large company, you can't have a central enterprise architect mapping out everything in a silo in an ivory tower and assuming that this is how business users are actually doing it. Of course, if you're implementing a big ERP system and there are certain things you can only do in one way, then the process mapping, the understanding of the relationships between business processes and assets will be true. But what we are more looking into are all those other tools. I think you call them maverick tools in the IT department, but all these little services and apps that are popping up everywhere. How do you get these under control? What do you do with all the bots that are coming in? If you want to control all this, well, you have no other choice but to bring in the process owners and their business users in the equation, and thereby giving them an incentive to mapping up the tools they use as part of the work instructions. So this is why I think you really have to bring them in, because even if there's a discrepancy between what your top-down mapping shows or your understanding as an enterprise architect and what people are doing, well, then these will become very interesting topics for discussion for sure.
Yeah, so what you're saying, Søren, is basically that enterprise architecture in a traditional sense is one thing, mapping that out, and of course IT plays a big role in that. But most businesses also have another need to get that full picture of how systems and bots and everything is interacting with their processes. So they also need that bottom-up approach where the employees give that information. They add that to the processes, so to say.
Yes, exactly. So maybe let's take an example. Maybe we have some kind of we are a manufacturing company that's doing made-to-order production, and maybe we have a small part of this in certain systems. But if we want to understand the end-to-end flow, then we also need to understand all the tools, assets, systems, templates, bots, everything else used in the flow, because only then will we get a complete picture. And when we have that complete picture, we will also have a better basis for knowing what to automate, what not to automate, what to change, what to improve, and we will have a full understanding of the impact of planned improvements that we do. So I think there is no other way. I know that, for instance, a lot of people are talking about process mining, of course, and process mining is one way of doing it if you are inside one big ERP system, for instance, and you are talking about something that's only happening with specific user groups within that system. But when you're talking about end-to-end flows and end-to-end processes, that is really when you want to get your process owners and your business users activated and part of it. So you get a little bit of top-down architecture on the high level, but maybe all the details become a little bit more bottom-up. Yeah,
that makes very good sense.
Of course, you can argue that there are certain challenges in doing this. It's also about rights and delegation. I mean, who should be able to use what? And this is where, as we show in the examples, we believe that the process owner and his or her team will be in the driver's seat. So they are the ones to take charge of all the assets, including bots, systems, templates, whatever, that are needed to run an efficient end-to-end process. That's the delegation, so that this particular process owner can, of course, only map up what is part of their process. And then maybe it would be nice to have a talk with the enterprise architect. This is what we're actually using. Well, this is what we see from a corporate IT or from an IT point of view. I see you're using these bots and these systems. Do you know we have a company option here? Why are we using these, not this? Well, this one has this functionality and this one doesn't. Then you get a lot of discussions happening. So it's also about opening up the communications flows. So it rather than just mapping up and closing your eyes, you wanna map up as a hypothesis for how your enterprise architecture is, and then you wanna get people involved. I think that's the case. But
yeah. And in my experience, enterprise architecture is often something, it lives in the IT department. The IT department knows it very well, but the rest of the organization usually does not have a very good understanding of that architecture. But by also having this layer in Gluu or another system, then that's more bottom up. Then you get your enterprise architecture visualized in a way that regular employees understand better as part of their processes. But Søren, we've talked a lot about until now about big corporations with big IT departments, with maybe they even have enterprise software dedicated to enterprise architecture. But what if you're not that big? What if you're just a regular sized, mid-sized, small company, maybe?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because when we talk to customers and prospective customers, then obviously the larger the company, the more you have a whole function for this with very specialized tooling. And what we will show you today is just a very pragmatic approach to the same. It doesn't cover all scenarios, all use cases necessarily. So the larger the company, the more you may need different types of tooling, perhaps including what we are proposing, a bottom-up tooling. But for the smaller companies, they don't have such a function many times, but they still need to know the relationships of their processes and their assets and their systems, so that if they want to upgrade their ERP system, then exactly which business processes are going to be impacted. If you have real-time information already at hand that you know is valid, then you're already saving a consultancy project from that alone and saving a lot of time. So I think that is what you're saying. That is what we are trying to say. It's more like, let's take a pragmatic approach where, while we are mapping our processes, working with our business processes, and we are putting people into the equation, let's also put now the templates, the assets, the bots, whatever other things we are needing as resources to execute this process. So it's just another enhancement of the same, but you want to have the full picture. But maybe Louise, we talked in the abstract sense enough. Maybe you could show us some real cases and examples.
Sure.
That would be interesting. Then I'll ask you some stupid questions.
Go ahead. So do you see my screen now?
Yeah, so let's say, this is an onboarding process, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's say I want to improve this process, but I'm unsure of the impact on other systems and other processes, maybe.
Yeah.
So can I actually do this, or will I risk breaking something else? Could we get closer to that, an answer to that question?
Yeah, exactly, because that is really what you want to know, right? If you're a process owner and you're improving or changing your process in any way, then you want to know, if I make changes, am I affecting other parts of the business chain, so to say, that I need to be mindful of, and maybe I need to involve some of my colleagues, but I need to be able to see what I'm affecting. That's what the Explorer tool in Gluu is really great for. So each process, in this case, an onboarding process, has this little Explorer feature. And when you click that Explorer, then in the center we see the process itself, onboard new colleague. And we see the processes surrounding it that it's connected to. We, of course, also see the process owner and the editors of this process. We also see if we have any activities, the little light green ones here, if we have any of our activities that are also being used by other processes. And in this case, we do have one. It's called Introduce to Workplace and Team. So if I click this little work instruction, it opens up in a drawer for me, so I can actually see what's in there. And if I want to change the content of a work instruction like this, then I now know, just by looking at this Explorer, that I need to be mindful of this other process that it's connected to, because they're also using that content. And if I want to, I can go explore that process it's connected to a little bit from here, but we'll do that in a moment. We'll just finish up on this one first.
It's a little bit abstract for me. Could you zoom in?
Absolutely, because and I'm glad you're asking that, Son, because this is, say, the top level view of the process, but you can get a lot more detail if you zoom in a little bit. So as you zoom, the image changes, and you now see all the names of processes and activities. And maybe, say, all the red and pink little bubbles up here, they're all tasks related to this process. But right now, because we are improving a process, we're not interested in those. So we'll just turn those off to get a simpler view. So now we're only seeing our processes and our activities and our components, because this process also has a couple of components attached to it. And components in Gluu are reusable building blocks. So since I know that components are often used in other places, I also want to know, okay, what other processes are using these components? So I have the option to expand this view, so that, let me just zoom out a little bit, just to give you the full overview. So now we have this component here in the center. We see it's still connected to our process that we started out with, but now we also see everything this...
Can you zoom again?
Yeah, I'll zoom in a second. Now we also see everything that this component is connected to, activities and processes. And the more we zoom, the more detail we get. So now we get all the names of the activities and of the processes that they're connected to. And in this way, we get a really nice overview with the process in the center that we're trying to improve or change, and how it's connected to other processes in our organization. We don't have to go looking for that information, calling colleagues or asking other people in the organization to find that out, because it's just right here in front of us.
Yeah. So and just so all the information here is mapped up by the people actually maintaining the process, right? So
exactly.
So why are we seeing Dynamics 365 in there? Could you show me how that has come in there?
Yeah, absolutely. That's because Dynamics 365, the component, has been used by some of our colleagues in all of these activities. So we can get an overview of where Dynamics is used just by clicking it. So this is our component, Dynamics 365, and it's used in all these activities. But we can also see it if we click the activity and get the work instruction that here our component is used by one of our colleagues.
Yeah, so as the HR manager, whoever it is that is mapping the onboarding process, as they are using components in their work instructions to make it easier for end users, then they're also having a byproduct of mapping up our whole architecture, so to speak.
And that's really the great thing about it, right? Because you just by using a component, you get the mapping for free. It's a bonus. The user doesn't have to do anything. They don't have to inform IT that they used this component so that IT can put it in the enterprise architecture software. It just automatically pops up the next time one of their colleagues look at the Explorer. They'll see that they used the component.
Of course, you wanna add the point that the foundation for all of this is that we have managed to make this useful for our end users, our business users, our process owners, because when they have an easier way to see their way of working, then they are only doing it because it's their way of working and not because of the needs of say, enterprise architects. We are giving them the byproduct of something that these business users are doing for themselves, right? So that they don't have to explain themselves all the time to new employees and to repeat information. And so that is really, I guess, if you don't get that foundation to succeed, then you are just doing mapping just for the sake of mapping. But here it's really we are taking a look behind the scenes, so to speak.
Yeah, and I also think it's a very great point to say that, well, most companies demand or request that if you change something in your process, please make sure you're not ruining something for someone else. But it can be very difficult to fulfill that request if you're the process owner, if you have no idea how your process is connected to other processes or activities. And that's why this becomes a very useful tool as well for regular employees and process owners out there.
Yeah, I guess you wanna delegate as much as you can, but you don't want people to run so fast ahead that they're gonna break things for others, and that is what this is helping us to avoid. Some way. Louise, now we're looking at one process. What if I want to have a more of an overall view of my business? So let's say I have somebody leaving the company, and I want to know the impact. Of that.
Well, this what we're looking at here is from a single process perspective, but we also have an Explorer for the full Gluu account. And at first glance, when we open it up, do you see it on the screen now?
It's quite overwhelming.
Yeah, it is a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff going on here. And that's because on the account Explorer level, you see everything, every single connection in your account. And that's a lot to look at. And it's not there for you to look at all at once. But like you said, Søren, for instance, if you want to know when a certain employee that's maybe they got a new job or they're retiring, you need to know what processes they're responsible for. Well, then you need all the information there so you can filter it. And now let's choose the process owner from the onboarding process we looked at before. Betty, we put her in our filter, and then we ask the Explorer to just show us things related to Betty. And right now it's also showing us components and roles. We'll turn those off because we're not very interested in that. And then we'll take a closer look at the processes and activities that Betty is responsible for. And as you can see, Betty is in the center, and she has these 5 processes that are directly linked to her as her responsibility. So if
Can I see the process?
Sorry?
Can I see the process?
Yeah, of course. As you can see, we have onboard new colleague right here. So if we click the process, we get it in our little drawer as a snapshot that we can navigate if we need to know a little bit more detail about it.
Yeah, so it's kind of a different way of navigating all the assets we have, all the processes, a different view of looking at their relationships, I guess, right?
Yeah. You can put it that way. And I think this is just such an easy way to quickly find out, okay, what's connected to what. In this case, we're talking about an employee. What's connected to this specific employee? What is she the owner of in terms of processes? But it could be a bunch of other things as well.
Other use cases that I can think of is if you can look at which roles and which employees are completely overloaded with too many responsibilities, that would be another way of looking at this.
Exactly.
Where you have certain risks because certain processes are dependent on only one person or something like that.
And that is absolutely an option. You can do that too. And you can also see, I know you've been asking previously, Søren, about the different activity types in Gluu. Maybe that was a good example as well to take that as a starting point. So, for instance,
let's say I wanna we have a project to improve our customer experience, and maybe I want to see all the customer touch points throughout the business. How can you show us that?
Well, it's just as simple. You just, in the filter, you just put the customer touch point as your filter, and there you go. You see everything that's related to customer touch points. So
which are the touch points here? Is that
sorry, I couldn't hear you. Can you just repeat?
Which are the touch points here?
Yeah. Well, if the touch points are activities in Gluu language, so if there's let's do this one then. Let's explore.
So the blue ones are the processes that all have customer touch points, and the green ones are the activities in those processes that are have real touch point with the customer. So I could. Okay, so if I could click into something, I guess, click into something and see what is actually how we do this. Yeah,
exactly, because you see this activity is marked as a customer touch point. And I think that's a good thing to know about the Explorer in Gluu. The starting point for the Explorer is always the process. So when we ask the Explorer to show us, okay, so show me all the customer touch points, then it will show us all processes that has activities marked as customer touch points, just like this one. And then we can explore the details of that. If we want to know exactly which activity, well, then we just click it. But if it's enough to know what processes, well, then we have them here at the top level overview. And we also have all the process owners on this map. So if we're starting a project to, like you said, to improve our customer journey, well, then we know that we have to involve all of these people because their processes are the ones connected to the customer journey.
What if we are jumping to a different department and we are now in the risk department? So we want to have an overview of all the activities that have been marked as a risk.
Yeah, you can easily do that same procedure. Then you just choose risk instead and apply that. And then the system shows you all the processes that you have marked as risks. So, and once again, you also see the process owners, so you know who you need to talk to.
Yeah. And then I guess it could be the same if I had like a GDPR or something, but that's not exactly a type. Could you?
Yeah.
How would you do something like that? That's a little bit. Or maybe I have a strategy. We have a new strategy. I want to find out all the processes that are enabling that strategy. But
yeah,
how would we do that?
Well, just so you don't have to watch me click around the system, I already prepared that for you guys to see. So here we have, as you see in the top right-hand corner, GDPR is a label in Gluu that you can use to, you can stick it on activities or processes if they're related to GDPR. And here, when we choose that label as our filter, we get to see everything related to GDPR, just in one simple view. We don't have to go through our entire process landscape to figure out what's related to GDPR. We can just have it visualized like this right here in 2 minutes.
And I think we have, maybe we have some enterprise architects on this webinar. They would all obviously be looking for applications. So if we want to put all our applications sort of at the center, it's we have an enterprise architecture workshop, and we want to see what are the applications we have and how are they related. Can we do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the components we looked at in the first example, the little yellow dots, we have component types, and on this demo account we have one called business applications, which is say a group of components linked together. So if we choose this one called business applications, it will not just show us one thing like customer touchpoint or GDPR. It will show us everything in the group of business applications. So here we have everything shown. As you can see, we have Dynamics 365 here in the center, and we have other business applications as we move around the map. And we can turn off things that we don't think are relevant and so on if we want to simplify our view, or we can explore further like I showed you in some of the other examples.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So just to summarize, we looked a little bit at looking at a specific process, how potential impact of a process improvement we want to make. Then I guess we also looked at the impact of somebody leaving the company. We looked at our customer touch points. We looked at our risks, and we looked at also GDPR, or it could have been strategy or something else. And finally, we looked at our applications. But I guess there could be so many more use cases, and maybe we are not enterprise architects in our daily work, so maybe we don't even have all of them. But I can see one of our audience has asked a question about, can we also show if forms are used? Could you show?
Definitely. I actually already prepared that one because I thought that was an interesting use case. So I'm glad someone else thought so too.
Okay.
So Forms in Gluu also has its own explorer, just like the process we started out with. And when we're looking at the form explorer, we see all the forms we have in our system. So they're all represented here in these orange little dots. And as we zoom in, we get more and more detail, just like the other explorers we've looked at. And forms are always connected to tasks in Gluu. So that's why you see the form and then the tasks that it's connected to. And I think something very interesting that this overview can show us is, oh, excuse me, for instance, do we have any forms that are not being used, that are not connected to any tasks? Well, it seems that we do. We have some free floating forms here, as you can see in the periphery of this image. That indicates that on this account, it might be time for us to do a bit of cleanup in our forms, because if they're not being used, maybe they should just not be there. But something else you can also see is if you add a filter, for instance, this submitted filter, and if we say no, what we'll see here are all the forms that have never been submitted. So no user has ever put any data in there. It's never been used on a task. And we even have some that are connected to tasks, but they have never been submitted. No one ever filled in the forms. So that's also a very good tool to get an overview. Okay, so we have these forms, there are even tasks, but no one's using them. So you have the option to follow up on that.
Yeah. Well, that was a great introduction, Louisa. I think what would be a next step? I mean, if anybody out there, maybe customers or potential customers, have use cases that they want to explore, then when you're inside Gluu, you can go to the green button in the corner, and we'll be happy to try to get you there by setting the right filters and all that. Of course, this.
Absolutely.
You've been spending a few hours on the tool, Louisa, but I know it's easy to use, but it still is quite mind-boggling. So you need to get your head around drilling down in information and everything.
Yeah, and we wrote a help center article on the Explorer, of course. So you can also get a little bit of guidance there if you go to our help center to see some different.
You can put that in the chat maybe at some point after the.
Yeah. We'll link it in the chat so that it's connected to the webinar. Sure.
That's great.
Yeah.
And maybe we should mention that this webinar has been recorded. Of course, it will be available on LinkedIn, but also on YouTube. So you can go into our YouTube channel, YouTube/GlueTube, and then you can share it with colleagues or whoever needs this information. So, yeah. Well, definitely. Nice talking with you, and thanks to our audience for their attention.
Yeah, you too. And
have a nice weekend.
Everyone have a nice weekend.
Bye.